Hi class, in the last presentation by Jennifer George Palalunas, you learned about heuristic evaluations. What I want to do in this video is just very quickly show you some examples of how you might use heuristic evaluations. In the last video you learned about how heuristic evaluations are used as part of an iterative design process. And what that means is that when we design websites or really any kind of interface that people are going to interact with, we design it in waves, or in steps, I guess you might think about it. We do the same kinds of activities over and over and over again. So when we design something, we don't just put it on the web and make it live. We prototype it. We have an idea, we turn it into a prototype of some kind, we test it out and get feedback. We take that feedback into consideration, we change what we made, we get more evaluation, and you sort of keep doing that until the thing that you've made is appropriate to the users. And a lot of times what you end up with doesn't look like what you started with, and that's okay. You're actually going to go through that process in this class in the last few weeks of the course, where you create your own website. You're going to go through the process, you're going to sort of sketch out the website, come up with ideas for it, evaluate those. Based on that evaluation, you're going to make changes to your idea, then you're going to make it into a website, then you're going to test it, and so you're going to go through that process. But the heuristic evaluation can be used really at any step of the process, but it's a really great tool to use actually while you're designing. So I want to show you an example. I'm currently working on wireframes for a payment system, for a checkout. And this is not something that I've ever made before. So I have to kind of figure out what I'm doing as I go. And so the first time I started laying out the page, and again, these are wireframes, so there's really not design, graphics, color, that kind of stuff. It's just kind of showing where things will go on the page. But I started building it. I thought, okay, this is a store where you can choose between two things. So I'll present the two things. And then I thought about heuristics. And for those who are just learning how to use heuristics, a lot of times it's helpful to actually pull those up and look at them. So here's the list of heuristics from Nielsen. Nielsen gives us 10 heuristics in chapter 26 that you're reading this week. You can see the first heuristic is the visibility of system status. The system should always keep users informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback within reasonable time. So I look at my design as I'm working on it, and I start to realize I haven't really done that. I'm not really telling the people who are looking at this what's going on. It says step 1, but how many steps are there? So I added a few things to provide feedback. So this piece up here is going to tell the person using this checkout what step they're on and how far they are along in the process. This check mark is going to remind them what they chose, make sure it's really clear this is the one that you picked, not the one over here. So then I can sort of keep working on my design, and as I work through it, I might come back and look at the heuristics and sort of say, okay, visibility, is that there now? Yes, I think that's there now. How about this? Match between system and the real world. The system should speak the user's language using words and phrases that are familiar to them. So have I done that? Well, seems pretty straightforward. We have the word continue on the button, makes it pretty clear that you're going to go forward. There's an arrow saying, that if you hit continue, you're moving forward in the process. Here on step 2, there's some language that seems pretty self-explanatory. First name, last name, email address, delivery address. Now, if I had just put address, that could be confusing, because is that the billing address or the address where this is going to be delivered? So I'm using the word delivery, which people will recognize, include a note. That's a little unclear, so I included some text underneath it, just letting people know what kind of thing the note might be. So I can go through and kind of check that. And just as the last example, user control and freedom. Users often choose system functions by mistake and will need a clearly marked emergency exit. Okay, do I have an undo? And actually I don't. Now that I'm looking at it, I don't really have an undo. So I could add one by making a little back button, and we're going to make this smaller because we don't really want people to go back, but if they get stuck, it might be nice to go back. Could even, oh wow, there's lots of places I could put this. I could even, instead of a back, I could make that an arrow. I can put it over here. lots of different things that I could do with it, but it's clear that I haven't included any kind of emergency exit or undo button. So as I'm designing, I can look at these heuristics and see what I'm missing and what I need to work on. I want to show you an example of a heuristic evaluation that I filled out for a student project here on campus. This is a project team over at the Virginia Ball Center was creating an app for the David Owsley Museum, and I wrote a heuristic evaluation. So the heuristic evaluation, again, it's done by experts. In the design example I just showed you, I was kind of being my own expert, and if I didn't feel that I was an expert, I could send that design off to other experts and they could look at it. In this instance, I was one of the experts who looked at this. So the students created the design, and then they asked me to complete a heuristic evaluation. And so I pulled up my 10 Nielsen heuristics, visibility of system status, match between system and real world, and I wrote as the expert whether or not I felt that what they had designed was delivering that. And then I pointed out specific examples of places that supported or did not support these heuristics. So you can see match between system and the real world. They had a page that said login and sign in. There were two different buttons, login and sign in, and I don't understand the difference between those two things. So I would imagine that users also would be stuck on what button to press. So I wrote a note, login and sign in are both used, you need to pick one. So you can sort of take a look at what I'm doing here. I'm as an expert, I'm saying, here's where you're not meeting this heuristic. Here's where you're not showing the visibility of system status. Here's where you're not matching the system in the real world. Here's where you're not giving user control and freedom. Here's where consistency and standards are failing you. And then I give this to the client, they look at it and they can make changes suggested by my evaluation. And the last thing I want to show you is the mile plus reading. So this is just another set of heuristics. Nielsen gives us 10 basic heuristics. The mile plus heuristic set is just much more in-depth. And the way this is organized, you'll see that it tells you what the heuristics are, but then it says how to use them. So it has questions that you should ask yourself. So I could go back to my checkout that I'm working on, and I could use mile plus instead of Nielsen like I used previously. So accuracy, read carefully the text and verify it. Does this describe adequately the reference world? So first name, last name, email address, are those real world things? Yes. Is it consistent in itself? Am I using first name and last name, not something like first name and then last? Yes. Does it not contain errors? I don't see any errors here. Okay? So then I look at currency. Try to understand if the text is updated or not. Find the date of the text publication. Well, that's not on here, but I would say this probably doesn't really apply to a checkout. If the date is not reported, try to find other references that could help you understand the period of publication. Again, it doesn't really apply. Read carefully the text and try to answer these questions. Is it clear what the text is speaking about? So is it clear what this is trying to do? Step 2, recipient. Tell us more about your unsuspecting target. Does that make sense? Will people understand what that is? Okay, what is it supposed to cover? Well, it's supposed to be a page where you can order things to send to someone else as a surprise. So does it allow you to do that? So I can go through the mile heuristics one by one. So each of these sections tells you first what the section is. So navigation, what are the heuristics? And then second, questions that you can ask yourself in the actions, how to use navigation heuristics, questions that you can ask yourself as you go through the design. It's going to look something like this. So every problem is going to identify by the name given to that heuristic in the mile plus. So what heuristic is not being met? In this case, graphic icon consistency is not being met. So this student identifies that problem and then explains why that's a problem. What's wrong with this? What's not consistent? What graphic icons are problematic? And they have included screenshots to show this inconsistency. So you can see in the screenshots that this site is using 2 different play buttons. So those icons are very inconsistent. And so there's 2 screenshots. An example, he ranks the severity of the problem. He suggests an improvement and then provides a reference scenario. So how did he get there? How did he come to understand that the graphic icon consistency was a problem? What was he doing as an expert going through the site when he found that problem? That's everything that I want to talk about. If you have any questions about the assignment where you complete a heuristic evaluation, please let me know.